So I will be using our release notes sort of loosely. And if you have not seen those yet, you can access those from our documentation. There's also a direct link from our email that we sent out with release details. And as we kind of go through these topics, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and I will try and make sure to answer them if you know, I see them while we're on the relevant topic. If not, I can circle back at the end and answer any questions. Also, of course, you can always get in touch with us through our support form on our website. Hopefully you all are seeing my screen right now, but you can go to our website and contact support for any questions that may come up or issues that you have in general. So let me switch gears and go directly to our release notes here. And I will kind of structure this in sort of a slightly a different way than our release notes are currently laid out. So kind of the agenda that I've planned to go through is first to talk about any critical updates or action items and any considerations that I want to make sure that you're aware of prior to upgrading to our current version of payments. Then we'll also talk about enhancements that we have introduced in this version and new fields that may need to be added to the layout. And then lastly, we'll talk about any bug fixes that we addressed and any known issues that we want to make sure to communicate. And so, of course, first at the sort of top of our release notes, we provide a link to our upgrade instructions. We always recommend that you upgrade in a sandbox prior to upgrading your payments app in production. That's just so you can run through your own processes and make sure that everything is still working properly in the context of your own Salesforce org. We do have a dedicated QA team that executes thorough end-to-end testing to ensure stability and optimal functionality of our apps. However, all of our customers have unique use cases, and many times they have their own custom processes dependent on Blackthorn elements. So doing some of your own regression testing in the sandbox is the best practice before upgrading in production. Moving along to sort of the critical updates. And so there have been a few updates pushed down into Salesforce orgs by Salesforce over the last few releases. And so I want to talk briefly about those. Specifically, Salesforce pushed down a critical update. I believe it was right at the end of August, the 18th, the 20th, sometime around that date, which will affect any customers who are on versions of payments earlier than 4.160, which was released back in the spring. But the reason that we highlight it in this release is because of that update being enforced in August. Any of our customers who are on those older versions were seeing issues. They were affected. And specifically, without getting too technical, we do have a link to that specific critical update from Salesforce here if you wanted to kind of read more about it. What we were seeing in the context of our app is customers who are using that older version that would have been included an older version of some of our classes. For example, notably, I would say the one thing that seemed to be obviously affected was the code that validates payment methods. And so it was very obvious if you were affected, you were seeing that payment methods were not fully validating. So for the most part, most people realized immediately that they might have had an issue, and of course the solution is to upgrade. But of course, if you want to just double check, make sure that you are on a version older than 4.160, you can go to setup and go to your installed packages, find the Blackthorn Payments package, and just check out your version number here. Also, the kind of what customers who were affected after that critical update, how they kind of realized there was a problem is when you know, they were validating their or adding new payment methods in Salesforce. You know, they weren't seeing this payment method status update. So it'd have a blank value instead of a valid or invalid. And then, you know, if you were, depending on how you create payment methods, you would still see sort of details in these fields, which generally are cleared once we send those to the payment gateway for validation. So those are kind of the two key ways to identify whether or not you are affected by this critical update. And of course, again, the solution to restore that functionality is just to make sure that you've upgraded to our latest version. Jumping back to our release notes, another change recently that I wanted to point out related to some Salesforce updates, specifically around our webhook permission set. And so in the summer 20, and also kind of extending into Salesforce's next release, they are enforcing more and more security changes around guest user access. And of course, if you use our webhooks to bring in events from your payment gateway, we were seeing some changes with that access, those access changes affecting our webhook events coming into Salesforce. So the changes specifically, Salesforce no longer allows that view all permission for guest users. And so we have removed that view all permission from our webhook admin permission set. Now, of course, that alone will prevent webhook events from coming into Salesforce. So there is an important step. Many of you have probably already completed this step. We have sent out communication on this particular update. And but if you have not yet created a sharing rule for a payment gateway to make sure that that guest user has the proper access they need to create the webhook events, then you would need to make sure and do that. And just to show you what that would look like, this is the action that would be needed on your part once you upgrade to the newest version of payments, if you have not done this already. If you go to setup and go into your sharing settings, you would want to set up a sharing rule on the payment gateway object. Let me scroll down here. Similar to what I have set up here, and we have step-by-step instructions in our documentation. This is just a kind of an overview of how to do that. But essentially, you would need to create a new rule, fill out the label, and then you would want to create a rule based on guest user access, or guest user access based on criteria. And we suggest that you just, for criteria, set the webhook label is not equal to null, and then just make sure it's shared with your webhook guest user. And so this just makes sure that you know, that guest user can read the payment gateways so that it can properly create those webhook events. Again, we've got a lot more information in our documentation about that specific change and what to do to make sure that your webhook events continue to come in after that's been enforced by Salesforce. Moving on, so one other consideration, or one thing I want to make sure that specifically our Authorized.net customers are aware of. We did have a change in this latest package, specifically around some changes to our encryption logic, which affected Authorized.net tokens. And so if you use Authorized.net for a gateway in your org, when you upgrade, after you upgrade to this newest version, you immediately want to come to that your payment gateway records and click on your Authorized.net gateways Some you may have multiple, but if you just have one, of course, you just have to do this. You'll have to do this with each payment gateway record you have that's currently connected to Authorized.net. You just want to come here and click this Connect to Gateway button, and then just sign in again to your Authorized.net account. And then it'll take you to this page just to authorize Blackthorn Payments. And this is really just kind of brings the encrypted tokens back into Salesforce. What we were seeing is that if you don't perform this step, we have sort of some customers who weren't able to process payments or getting specific errors that weren't necessarily didn't give enough context to fully understand what was going wrong. But all that you need to do is to reauthorize this gateway so that everything works properly. You can process payments, tokenize your payment methods as normal. That's specifically for Authorized.net. The Stripe and our other gateways weren't affected by this change. Okay, so jumping back to our release notes, we do have a call out about a breaking change, and this is specifically related to our relationship settings. And so, and just to kind of take a step back and explain our relationship settings object and feature in a bit more detail. So many of you who have been Blackthorn customers for a while may remember at one point we matched your existing accounts and contacts to your payment gateway customers based on email. It was hard-coded. We did have a custom setting where you could enable to use both email and name for matching, but it was very basic. You didn't have flexibility over what data points to match on. It was just, if it was a new payment gateway customer, no matter what way that came into Salesforce, whether it was created through the webhooks or created if you had added a new payment method or through the API, we would just try and find a contact with a matching email, and that's how we would determine a match to populate a contact and an account on that payment gateway customer to connect everything to the rest of your Salesforce records. So we had, it's been a few releases ago, we sort of introduced our relationship settings feature, which gives you sort of more flexibility over how you want that matching to occur. And so in this newest release, we've added a couple of additional fields. We call this a breaking change because one of these fields is required. So you want to make sure that you add this field, which I'll show you momentarily, to your layout, and also that you set the value so that your matching will continue as you previously had that configured. So if I'm going to jump over to my payment gateway record, the relationship setting has to be, we have a field on the payment gateway for their lookup to the relationship setting. And so this is kind of part one of a two-piece puzzle in the updated matching. So from my payment gateway, I just want to, I'm going to click on this record that I currently have assigned to this, this gateway. And so on the relationship setting record, we create one of these by default with just sort of kind of default values for how you want to match, but these are configurable. So you can sort of define how you want that matching and or creation behavior to happen. So of course, you've got your relationship rule with multiple options. So you can only relate a matched record, create a new record if there is no match, always create a new record, or disable the matching and creation altogether. By default, we set it up with this relationship rule. Now the new field, and the field that's required, and the reason that we have that breaking change call out at the top of our release note is because is this field that I have on the layout. So when you upgrade and you want to make sure to modify your relationship setting page layout and add the 2 new fields. This match records field, which is required to make sure that your matching continues as expected. And also this set all email fields, which I'll explain in a little more detail here shortly. For this match records, this is a multi-pick list, so you've got several, you've got options on specifically which records we want to match. So you can, you know, choose if you want to try and match on multiple records. You can move other values into this chosen column. This is my test org, I just have it matching us on contact. And of course, if it finds a matching contact, it automatically will populate the account related to that contact on my payment gateway customer record, which I'll kind of pivot and show you here in a second as well. So that's our new field. That's important that you add this to the layout and make sure you make a selection in that new field. We've also added this set all emails field, set all email fields checkbox as well. I believe this will be relabeled in our next release to match all email fields to make it a little more clear as to what it's for. But essentially, we have opened up the functionality to try and match on additional email fields that you might have on your records instead of just the standard email fields. So for example, if you have a contact record and maybe that you have some custom email fields that you use instead of just the standard email fields. Now, in our newer version, if you make sure to select this option and then also configure your duplicate rule. Again, we'll move kind of segue into the duplicate rule side of this in just a moment. As long as you include those custom fields in your matching rules, in your duplicate rules, then we can also try and match based on custom email fields, which was a very in-demand request from many of our customers. Nothing else here has changed too much. So, you know, the new record settings still has the same fields as before this latest upgrade. You could decide, you know, if you did have an option that included creating records, you can decide what type of record that we would want created if a match wasn't found. And also, if it's a contact that you're creating, you can also decide whether or not it goes a step further and creates an account, or if you just want that new contact assigned to a bucket account. Of course, if you go with the bucket account option, then you can define that bucket account that the new contact would be created and associated with. And then just a quick note on record types. And so if you are setting, if you do want these records to be created with a certain record type, in these fields, it's not expecting a Salesforce record ID. It's expecting the name of the record type. So just to clarify, I know there were some questions that came into support regarding how to properly set up these fields so that the record types that you would like to be used are used in this creation process if you have that set up. So beyond this relationship setting, kind of the other part of our matching logic is just let's open a couple of times up here, are your duplicate rules in Salesforce. And so I'm specifically on my contact duplicate rule that's active. And so what our logic is doing is it is reviewing the matching rules that are related to your active duplicate rules, and that's how we decide what's really a match. So in this example, I've got a contact duplicate rule set up to match on exact email. So what that means is for a payment gateway customer. So again, one gets created through any of the various means. Either you manually create one, or you have automation that creates a customer, or you add a payment method, you know, and one is created for you, or it's created through API. We will try and use sort of whatever fields that we can from this payment gateway record, and match to existing, whatever existing records that you've defined in your relationship setting. So again, kind of going back to mine, I had it set up to either match on existing or create a new contact. And so when this record was created a little earlier today, based on my duplicate rule, which was just an exact match on email, our logic matched this record up with an existing contact, and of course then just assign the account. Of course, if I change this, let me just clear out these values that it's set, and then just change this email to one that I know is not set up in our org. When I save this record, you can see now that it's created a new account and contact because my duplicate role is looking only at an email, and because this email does not exist, our relationship setting created a new account and contact for that, based on that change. So the matching logic will run on creating a payment gateway customer or modifying one, as long as it doesn't have an account and contact or a lead already populated. But that's just really a general overview of how the relationship setting in conjunction with your duplicate rules works to make sure you have accounts, contacts, or leads, however you'd like that configured, automatically populated on these payment gateway customer records. And of course, that's important because if I were to go to this account, I could now see, you know, payment methods and transactions related to that account and related lists because of these lookup relationships. And again, the kind of break, I wouldn't say we listed as a breaking change, but just to circle back around in the September release, we do want to, again, make sure that you add these 2 additional fields to this relationship setting. Specifically, this match records field is important to add and assign a value to make sure that any existing configuration you have with that matching is unaffected and still works properly post-upgrade. We get a lot of questions around this feature in general. So of course, we're happy to answer any questions specifically about it, or you know, help work through any issues you have in setup. Okay, moving on to kind of the extent of our critical updates, breaking changes. A couple of things I talked about within the last few minutes are covered elsewhere down through documentation, or I'm sorry, release notes. So you may see something we've already talked about a little further down, but we'll just kind of go quickly through those if it's just to not be redundant. Well, let's move on to the enhancements section of our release notes. And so this first enhancement is specifically for our Stripe billing customers. We've added a couple of new fields to our subscription object, and those fields are paused and resumes at. And so in Stripe, you can pause a subscription and choose a date at which you want to resume that subscription. So we have added those 2 fields to our subscription object in Salesforce. And so on my page layout here for this subscription, you can see them under the status here. Of course, right now, these 2 fields are not actionable from Salesforce, so you cannot come to a record that's not paused and, you know, set this to pause and set a date for it to be resumed. These are not actionable from Salesforce. But if you make a change to a subscription, For example, this is the same subscription that is related to that Salesforce record. You can, if you go to the update, oops. So let me just do this way so I can kind of reset it. So now I've kind of reactivated the subscription that I had previously paused. But this is what you would see on the Stripe dashboard. If you go to pause a subscription, you have an option to pause payment collection. And then you can set, you can leave it pause indefinitely or until a custom date. If you choose a custom date and pause the subscription, the webhooks would bring that change back into Salesforce, and that's when you would see this paused and resumes at fields populated. So that's really just giving you sort of that visibility into that change on the Salesforce side. At this time, you cannot set those fields from Salesforce, these in particular, and that won't make a call out to Stripe to pause it. Okay. And then jumping back over to our release notes, we talked about relationship settings earlier. So we've just added those two additional fields for more control over matching logic. We have quite a bit of documentation on relationship settings now that we've built on our documentation site. We do have a link in our release notes to the page that specifically covers that in detail. So if you want to come and read more about it, you can do so just coming to the release note and clicking this link in the enhancement section. We have implemented support for Stripe idempotent requests. I feel like I always say that word wrong, so forgive me if I just butchered it. But basically, we've implemented support that will, and we've implemented this for charges and refunds, so that if for whatever reason a charge goes through, any second request or any second call out from that same Salesforce transaction will be blocked systematically from Stripe. And there's a lot of different scenarios that we've seen this periodically, and it's not a widespread issue by any means. Just to kind of, from the support side, what I've seen in customer orgs from time to time will be situations where you've got internal processes that perhaps are firing when our transaction is getting captured, and the call out gets made. It actually goes to Stripe and gets processed, but on Salesforce, maybe the transaction, because of that process failure, the transaction, instead of moving to completed, goes into needs review, or it stays open altogether if there's something that happens that prevents our logic from updating the transaction to that completed status. Prior to implementing this support, there was no way to really know without checking Stripe for sure that transaction had not been processed. So we ran into, we were seeing on occasion where these things were happening, and there were a potential for maybe two charges to get processed in Stripe that originated from one transaction. It's rare, but it was happening. And a lot of times it's very specific to processes that were built in Salesforce, specifically around or based on transaction statuses. So, and failures sort of, within those processes. So what would happen now if one of those scenarios were to happen, and the transaction had actually gone and been processed in Stripe, but maybe we didn't get the response back, or there was an interruption and the Salesforce record was still, the transaction was still open, or it was in needs review. If a second attempt was made either by someone manually trying to capture the same transaction, or if you moved it back to open in our batch job that runs overnight, picked it up, if it's coming from that same transaction, it'll be blocked now. And then you'll see a message similar to, well, not similar to, but with this exact sort of verbiage, basically letting you know that it was blocked because of that support, of that additional support that we have implemented in this package. And this is just an indication that we have already pushed this transaction to Stripe, and there's already record of it. So this would be your we blocked a second attempt to charge that transaction. So that should help cut down on any potential error scenarios where a transaction might be pushed to Stripe multiple times. So this will just help ensure that only one call out is made from from each Salesforce transaction. Jumping back to our release notes. We talked about this earlier too, and kind of the critical updates. We did remove that view all permission from the Webhook event admin permission set. Again, so you'll want to make sure that when you upgrade, if you don't already have that sharing rule on Payment Gateway, that you add that so that your Webhook events continue to come in without interruption. We do have some step-by-step instructions again within our documentation. There's a link to that additional instructions from our release notes. And then the last sort of point here in our enhancements is just the historical sync has an updated UI. I was really excited when I saw this. I didn't realize it was coming, and kind of saw it when I think I was doing a training call with a customer, and so it's nice. I'll show it. I'll actually move over to, let me get over to my, this is specifically Stripe, the Stripe historical sync. So we've built out and it's really a feature that a lot of our newer customers who are just implementing Blackthorn would use if they are existing Stripe customers and they want to bring in any existing records in Stripe into Salesforce. So we refer to that as our historical sync. It just pulls in all of your customers and payments and payment methods, and if you use Stripe billing, it pulls in subscriptions and invoices. So it just gets everything kind of prior to the Blackthorn implementation pulled into Salesforce, so you have kind of a full access to your Stripe records. So the way that you get to that historical sync is through your payment gateway record. So again, this is Stripe specific. We have several actions across the top. Sync with Stripe is the one that'll take you to this feature. And so this is what our new UI looks like. And so we've kind of split it between sort of the core objects in Stripe. So you can set sort of a time frame around what you want to bring in. If it's just a subset of data, you can, as you click these buttons, it will bring in your customer records, bring in your payment methods, any charges and refunds, any payouts. Also, we have sort of a separate button for the billing, the Stripe billing related records, and Stripe Connect as well. So this is also fairly new. Just the support for bringing in Connect records was in the last couple of releases. So this is just our new UI. Functionality existed before, but a new fancier interface, which is very, very nice. Okay. All right, and so that kind of sums up everything from our enhancement section of our release notes. I'll move into bug fixes that are included in this new package. So this first on the list is we had a bug where the default source and default payment methods fields on accounts and contacts were not being populated properly. So just to kind of explain what was happening there. I'm on a payment gateway customer record now. And so if you've noticed, if you've looked at these records closely, there's a default source field, which is a lookup to the payment method. And so this, the record that gets populated in this field is based on which payment method is marked as the current default. So if I kind of look at the related list for this payment gateway customers' different credit cards on file, you can see there are 5 of them, but there's one of them that's marked as the default. And so what we were seeing before is when you add a new payment method, or you go to one of the other payment methods for this particular customer and switch that payment method, switch the default flag from one to the other, it was not updating properly on this in this field. Likewise, we've got on both the related account and contact, there is a lookup to the payment method, default payment method. And so we were seeing an issue where those fields weren't updating when either new payment methods were marked as the default or another existing became the default. So we've fixed that bug. I did want to mention that it is relying on webhooks though, so it could take up to 5 minutes to see those fields change in relation to the change or of the default payment method or adding a new payment method. But before we were seeing that this was not happening or was not happening consistently, so we did address that in this latest version. Jump back to release notes. Okay. We had an issue with payment schedules where multiple transactions were being created with the same date. That's something that has been resolved in our newest version. Also, we had some instances specifically around authorized transactions. And so from a transaction record, see if I've got one I can just sort of show you quickly. On our transactions, you have the option to either immediately capture a transaction or to authorize a transaction. And so kind of the context around this bug was, if you would authorize a transaction, this of course pushes it to Stripe as authorized. There's I believe it's a 7-day window where that sort of authorization stays live and active. And once that period expires, we get a webhook event back to that the charge or that authorization has expired. And the kind of expected behavior was that, the same transaction that had originally been authorized just gets updated with like a different status. But what we were seeing is that it was creating sort of an additional refund transaction, which was not the expected behavior, because there was no true charge event. There's no need for an additional transaction record when we should have just been updating that original. So we fixed that bug in this package. Also, we had sort of an interesting bug where if you were to use the remove from gateway button on a payment gateway customer, it was creating an additional payment gateway customer record in Salesforce. And that was that one was a little interesting to troubleshoot from our team. But so to just give some context to that, we've got a button here to remove a customer, remove from gateway. And this essentially just, deletes or archives and activates that customer record on Stripe, in your payment gateway. However, prior to this new package, when you would remove a payment gateway or remove one from Stripe and the webhooks would sync, it was actually creating a duplicate record in Salesforce. And so that has been resolved in this new release. And that's all of our bug fixes for the September package. I think we've talked about all of these new fields and layouts already, but just to kind of go back through them as a summary. On subscriptions, we added the paused checkbox and resumes at date time field on the subscription. Again, those are not actionable from Salesforce, but they will store those values if you were to pause a subscription from within the Stripe dashboard. We've also added a match records multi-select pick list and the set all email fields on the relationship settings object. Again, especially that match records field, it's very important that you add that field to the relationship settings layout after you upgrade and set a value to make sure that your matching continues to work as expected. We've also relabeled the legal entity object. It's now company info. So if you see that company info tab and wonder where it came from, it's the legal entity. It's just been relabeled. Moving to the known issues section. This is actually related specifically to one of the critical updates that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. And so this is specifically referencing one of the cryptic errors that we were seeing for those customers on versions earlier than 4.160. And so this is when we were seeing kind of this error in the logs or in the webhook events when payment method validation was failing. And so of course this is due to that critical update being pushed down in late August. And then of course, as soon as customers were upgrading to our newest versions, you know, this error was resolving and their payment methods were then validating as normal because we have refactored that in the newer versions, everything that has come out since around the spring timeframe. And then again, this last section is just another just reference to our upgrade instructions. I will note on this, maybe should have talked about this a little more at the very beginning. If you are upgrading from an earlier version, I would say before 4.163 specifically, you may have to upgrade to our July release first before, if you encounter an upgrade. Let's say you go ahead and install this newest package and you encounter an error, it's very likely you might have to kind of follow an upgrade path because of some code that we removed between packages. We try not to do that whenever possible because it sometimes will create these upgrade issues. And you know, now there's a need for a little bit of an upgrade path, but if you do encounter any initial errors when you try and upgrade to our September release, I would just go ahead and recommend that you go from our September, just click on the July release notes. And so there is a call out at the top of these for installation issues. And so, you know, you may need to go ahead and use this first link to go ahead and upgrade to 4.163, and then you can try again to upgrade to September. And of course, we actually get anytime anybody gets an error trying to install or upgrade one of our packages, we get a support case for it, and we try and reach out immediately to help. You know, based on we see sort of the error codes that are coming in. So you can, of course, also reach out to us, and we're happy to help decode any upgrade errors that come in as a result. And so that kind of wraps up our September release. I know we still have a few minutes, so I'll just hang out here. If anybody has questions, feel free to put those in the chat. And look, I just got maybe one that's here that I'll answer. What is the version number of the September release? So the September release is 4.170. Go ahead and type that into this answer as well. You are welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions that we can address with the time we have remaining? Great. Well, I appreciate everybody's attendance today. Again, very happy to answer any questions. After this, if you have questions, you can reach out to us by using our support form. We're also going to post the recording of this webinar on, we'll actually update our release notes with a link to the recording if you want to reference it for any reason. I hope everybody has a great day. Feel free to drop off if needed, or I'll just hang out here for a little bit longer if any questions do come in. Thanks again for your time, everyone.